Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey there, and a welcome to you. Welcome specifically to Monday, October 2. And as usual, an awful lot going on. Donald Trump has showed up at the New York courthouse where he will speak. He and his sons are facing a civil trial. I need to go into all of that. I mean, you know what he's facing. It's interesting in that it's not a jury trial. The judge is going to decide now. The judge has already decided he committed fraud. Now, the decision, this is all about how much money he is going to have to pay, how much he'll be fined, whether he'd be permanently barred from running any business in New York City. He, of course, will parlay this into fundraising appeals and further evidence of how the deep state is trying to take him down. And it will excite his base and exhaust us all. This trial, apparently, I'm stunned that they're saying it could last months. And I find that extraordinary. But there you go. I have little doubt the outcome will be pretty rough on him and his sons and his business empire in New York. So there's that. I see that he is holding forth right now on, I guess, before he goes in. Oh, God, help us. Yeah. I will continue as if he's not blathering. I want to instead share with you something that I came across that I thought was so powerful. And it was because I was reading an article in the New York Times, and the reporter, one Helene Cooper, name I certainly do know, did something that was, to me, just astonishing. I mean, she ended a piece after enticing us with something, and then just ended it without telling us what this man had said. Let me explain. I'll back up. The man I am talking about is the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs. This is the man who has now succeeded General Mark Milley, who is under threat of execution by MAGA world and the former president. And this poor soul who's going to step into his shoes will be the first black head of the Joint Chiefs, the highest ranking military officer in the country. And his 4-year term started on Monday. His name, you'll learn it, just as we learned Milley, is General Charles Q. Brown, Jr. And Milley, as you know, upon handing the baton to General Brown, in giving his farewell remarks, responded essentially to what Trump has done to him and his family, which has caused them to live in fear, caused them to expend, I can't imagine how much money on security, upended their lives with his death threat. And General Milley, upon leaving his position as head of the Joint Chiefs, said, among other things, "We do not take an oath to a country, a tribe, or a religion. We do not take an oath to a king or a queen, to a tyrant or a dictator or a wannabe dictator. We do not take an oath to an individual. We take an oath to the Constitution, to the idea that is America." And that was his, I thought, rather elegant pushback to the vile man who he served under as commander-in-chief. General Brown, who takes over as a 4-star Air Force general, fighter pilot, and he's a guy who's come up in the military, and I was reading about him in this piece that Helene Cooper put together. And she pretty much ends the piece by saying that he electrified the enlisted ranks with his George Floyd video in 2020. Against a dark background, a solemn General Brown, clad in fatigues, stared into the camera. And then she quoted his first words. "As the commander of Pacific Air Forces and a senior leader in our Air Force and an African American, many of you may be wondering what I'm thinking about the current events surrounding the tragic death of George Floyd. Here is what I'm thinking about." And then it ends. I'm thinking, what was he thinking about? It ends with, she doesn't tell us any more of what he said, but she said that what he said so moved everybody that he began attracting crowds to anywhere he showed up, enlisted men, other people wanting to hear what he had to say. So I, of course, went nuts. And I was thinking, how could you do that to a reader? Here's what I'm thinking. And then not tell us what he was thinking. So I looked it up. And yeah, this is what the man who is now the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said. No one asked him to. He felt the need to. This is a few days after the death of George Floyd. And he is then the commander, Air Force commander of the Pacific Theater. And I'm not going to read it all to you, but it's powerful stuff. And I just want to use this as a way of introduction to the man who is succeeding General Milley in a very, very difficult moment in our country's history. This man is going to have a very consequential position, given what Donald Trump and his followers are potentially going to do. Said, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking about how full I am with emotion, not just for George Floyd, but the many African Americans that have suffered the same fate as George Floyd. I'm thinking about protests in my country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, the equality expressed in our Declaration of Independence and the Constitution that I have sworn my adult life to support and defend. I'm thinking about a history of racial issues and my own experiences that didn't always sing of liberty and equality. I'm thinking about living in two worlds, each with their own perspective and views. I'm thinking about my sister and I being the only African Americans in our elementary school and trying to fit in. I'm thinking about then going to a high school where roughly half the students were African American and trying to fit in. I'm thinking about my Air Force career where I was often the only African American in my squadron, or as a senior officer, the only African American in the room. I'm thinking about wearing the same flight suit with the same wings on my chest as my peers, and then being questioned by another military member, "Are you a pilot?" I'm thinking about how I sometimes felt my comments were perceived to represent the African American perspective when it is just my perspective, informed by being African American. I'm thinking about some of the insensitive comments made without awareness by others. I'm thinking about being a captain at the officers club with my squadron and being told by other African Americans that I wasn't black enough since I was spending more time with my squadron than with them. I'm thinking about my mentors and how I rarely had a mentor that looked like me. I'm thinking about the sound advice that has led to my success. And even so, most of my mentors would not relate to my experience as an African American. I'm thinking about the pressure I felt to perform error-free, especially for supervisors I perceived had expected less from me as an African American. I think about having to represent by working twice as hard to prove their expectations and perceptions of African Americans invalid. I'm thinking about the airmen that have lived through similar experiences and feelings as mine, or who were either consciously or unconsciously unfairly treated. Conversely, I'm thinking about the airmen who don't have a life similar to mine and don't have to navigate through two worlds. I'm thinking about these airmen, how they view racism, whether they don't see it as a problem since it doesn't happen to them. I'm thinking about our two sons and how we had to prepare them to live in two worlds. I'm thinking about the frank and emotional conversations my wife and I have had with them just this past week as we discuss the situations that have led to the protests around our country. Finally, I'm thinking about my historic nomination to be the first African American to serve as the Air Force Chief of Staff. I'm thinking about the African Americans that went before me to make this opportunity possible. I'm thinking about the immense expectations that come with this historic nomination, particularly through the lens of current events plaguing our nation. I'm thinking about how I may have fallen short and will likely continue falling short, living up to all these expectations. I'm thinking about how my nomination provides some hope, but also comes with a heavy burden. I'm thinking about how I can make improvements personally, professionally, institutionally, so that all airmen, both today and tomorrow, appreciate the value of diversity and can serve in an environment where they can reach their full potential. I don't have all the answers. I'm thinking about, without clear-cut answers, I just want to have the wisdom and knowledge to lead during difficult times. I want the wisdom and knowledge to lead, participate in, and listen to necessary conversations on racism, diversity, and inclusion. I want the wisdom and knowledge to lead those willing to take committed and sustained action to make our armed forces better. That's what I'm thinking about. I wonder what you're thinking about. I want to hear what you're thinking about and how together we can make a difference. Now, that strikes me as an extraordinary leader. And those were remarks that, you know, this is our new head of the Joint Chiefs. And I am comforted knowing that this man, General Brown, General Charles Q. Brown Jr., is at this moment in that important position in this most consequential time. So, wanted to share that. So I have to tell you, I did not really follow the machinations, the back and forth of the, oh my God, 2 seconds to shut down, and oh, look, at the last minute, the rabbit gets pulled out of the hat. And so we have to go through this all again. What? It's just 45 days. This is no way to run a country. And this is how a country goes down the tubes if it puts into power people who do not believe in government and people who do not respect the institutions of the government, people who are not honorable, people who are not truthful, people who are not believable or trustworthy. And so the circus continues. And the circus is, lest you think otherwise, and I'm sure you don't, the circus is brought to you not by P.T. Barnum, not by the Ringling Brothers. It's brought to you by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans who would destroy the best in America because they're threatened by it. You know, I was reading who was it? Christoph, I guess, or David French, I think. He wrote a piece about Christian nationalism and how, I mean, understand that is at the base of Trump's power, amazingly. Christian nationalism. I'm sure for a true Christian, that is, I can't imagine how upsetting that is. I mean, I really can't. I cannot imagine. To have this religion that was founded purportedly on love and kindness and peace, transformed into this ugly, angry, murderous thugocracy. But French in this column pointed out that, you know, at the most fervent part of his base, the part that will not move, you cannot move them, are the people that you would call Christian nationalists. They're the people who, I guess, flunk civics. They're the people who think that this is a Christian nation to be ruled by Christians and by, for all intents and purposes, I guess, white Christians. And they, whether you can wrap your head around it or not, see Donald Trump as God's appointed leader. They do. They believe that. You cannot make them unbelieve that. Donald Trump. If you're a rational person, it is truly impossible to get your head around that. But Donald Trump, God's appointed leader, destined to save this nation from, I guess, you and me, Black people, gay people. My God. They are absolutely certain that by supporting this horrible human being, that they then become instruments of God's divine plan. I know you can't make it up. And a poll that was taken recently, he wrote, shows that more Republicans see Donald Trump as a person of faith than they see Mitt Romney as a person of faith, or Mike Pence. This man of no belief in anything but himself. But it becomes understandable if you understand that the nature of the connection between these Christian nationalists and Donald Trump is because someone whispered in someone's ear that it's God's plan. I'm not kidding. You cannot reason with this. And you know, I happened to see I think it was in the Washington Post today. And it was written by a doctor, an MD. It's sort of a, this must have been in like the lifestyle section of what anger does to our brains. And I started reading it, and it got very, very scientific, all about chemicals and stuff, and things that go on in our brains when we become angry, and what makes us it. Okay, and the fact is when you read that piece about how anger makes a brain incapable of reason, things literally shut down. And one of the things that is so emblematic of Donald Trump's base is their anger. And this doctor talks about the fact that he's not talking about Trump at all. It has nothing to do with this, but it informs so much of why those of us who are, just cannot wrap our heads around what is going on with these people. Part of the puzzle is that, Christian nationalism, that sort of, that in and of itself craziness, but has nothing to do with rationality. Nothing. Faith has nothing to do with reason. Nothing. But this doctor said that when a person feels excluded or devalued or disempowered, aren't those the things that the MAGA crowd feels and Trump stokes? That then creates anger. And people who are in that angry state want to punish the people who make them feel that way. But he goes on to talk about how then these neurotransmitters get released, and good God, something called norepinephrine, a chemical that acts in the brain closely related to adrenaline, is needed for, I mean, there's reasons that these chemicals are in our brains. But if they go ballistic, so when levels of these kinds of chemicals get excessive, the brain, literally, parts of it shut down. And the part of the brain that actually is capable of engaging in thinking is like ain't there. And what you're left with is the emotional brain. And this is where Donald Trump's, forgive me for this, brilliance enters. Because if he does have a gift, it is knowing how to activate the emotional brain, the one that he lives with all the time. And this doctor, I mean, my God, he goes on to talk about when these chemicals are in the brain, the person becomes really uncontrollable in some ways. It becomes incapable of following advice and becomes impulsive and doesn't consider the consequences of our actions. And wow. So one of the things that's going on, and that is potentially going to, take down this great experiment called the American democracy, is a brain chemical, norepinephrine. Because the levels of it are off the charts in too many Americans. The headline of that piece was "Anger Overwhelms Our Thinking Brain." Well, I think, and as I said, I think we're seeing evidence of that. I don't know how much to get into the exhaustion of what is happening in the U.S. Capitol. Will McCarthy survive? Will Gates knock him off? Will this or that? Here, again, the circus continues. There is some whispering that there is an effort on the part of some Republicans to actually expel Gates. They'll let what's his name? Who's that? I can't. The unbelievable lying congressman from Long Island. He's still there. They aren't expelling him, but there is a consideration of possibly can they pull off expelling Gates. I don't see what good that does, because behind Gates there's Gosar, and behind Gosar there's you just name them. There's Marjorie Taylor Greene, it just keeps on coming. God. But if you like a sideshow, if you like a three-ring circus, then man, this is your time. Since I last spoke to you, Senator Feinstein died, and I want to say that, reading about her life and her political career and what she did in her heyday, it just saddened me even more that she stayed too long at the fair, so that, so many people took her as like some bumbling joke when she had done so much. Saddened me. And never. We'll see. I also, something that happened since last I spoke to you was President Biden going to Arizona to help, I guess, unveil this John McCain library or something, center. And he gave a truly important speech. I hope you heard it. I hope you heard it. He was clear about the danger that exists right now. He was clear about who the people who would take our country down are. I think he was a little bit too generous. He actually seemed to suggest that, maybe not all Republicans are, but way too many. Way too many. The party is so riddled with this infestation that it has ceased to be a legitimate political party. But Biden, I'll read just a few of the words he said, because it was powerful. This is a dangerous notion that a president is above the law, that there are no limits on his power. Trump, he's saying his name now, good. Trump says the Constitution gave him, quote, the right to do whatever he wants, end of quote. I never heard a president say that, even in jest. Not guided by the Constitution or by common service and decency toward our fellow Americans, but by vengeance and vindictiveness. And he talked about if Trump gains office again, what will happen? Seizing power, concentrating power, says Biden, attempting to abuse power, purging and packing key institutions, spewing conspiracy theories, spreading lies for profit and power to divide America in every way, inciting violence against those who risk their lives to keep Americans safe, weaponizing against the very soul of who we are as Americans. This threat is a threat to the brick and mortar of our democratic institutions. It is a threat to the character of our nation. And then he broadened it because he said that other Republicans, including those who are seeking to be the nominee, such as Governor DeSantis, are equally engaging in the same kind of rhetoric. Ron DeSantis, who talked of slitting the throats of civil servants and members of Congress. These other Republicans who've talked about destroying the FBI, who have sought to whitewash the January 6th insurrection as what? A group of tourists? And so the president made clear in his remarks, it's not one person. It isn't just Donald Trump. It's not one person. It's the controlling element of the House Republican Party. And then he talked about how when Trump threatens Milley with execution and all the other threats he has made, and as I have said, created such true danger for people who are just doing their jobs as civil servants. He said of the Republicans, the silence is deafening. And it is. And he reminded us of Trump's denigration of John McCain. He said, and he reminded the crowd that Trump had said, he's not a war hero. He was a war hero because he was captured. And then Biden also reminded everybody that Trump had said that anybody who is captured, or in fact, any soldier who went to war, is a sucker. A sucker. This feisty Biden I like. Was John McCain a sucker? He asked. It was well done, overdue, could have been more forcefully, but he's not a forceful speaker. But, grading presidents on performance like it's some kind of friggin' act is, I think, what's gotten us to the point of electing a reality star as the president. You know that Mitt Romney's, by the way, said in his book, I haven't seen this, that he is spending $5,000 a day on security for himself and his family. And he ain't the only one. You can name the ones who would be. Anybody who hasn't kowtowed and kissed the feet. Anybody who he has, with his tweets put out there as someone worthy of execution. In a poll released this week, 51% of American adults said that they would vote for Donald Trump over Joe Biden. And good God, if there's ever like a gravesite for American democracy, You could put that on the headstone. 51% of Americans said they would vote for Donald Trump over Joe Biden. It's, again, pretty difficult to get your head around that. I want to get closer to home. I want to get to the Allegheny County Executive race. I got to tell you, these two races, this county executive race and the district attorney's race, these are going to get really ugly. They're going to get really ugly because there's big, big money flowing in. And it's going to be about exciting those chemicals in people's brains as opposed to reasoning with voters. Now, the ads that I've seen so far are not, in the county executive race, have not risen to the horrific level that Zappala's ad they started with, which is just the most racist. I have never seen such a racist ad. I'm assuming you've seen it by now. Zappala. Well, he's running as a Republican. If you're running with a Republican, you better make clear that you're on board. And one way to do that is play the race card. Oh my God. Pictures, terrifying pictures of black people with guns, blowing things up, shooting, breaking windows. And then Zappala tells you that the Democrat running, he likes that. Oh yeah, sure he does. He wants to see he's going to let all these black people out of jail so that they can run marauding through your neighborhood. It is mind-blowingly racist. Goes beyond dog whistle. But I want to say this about Joe Rockey, who is running against Sarah Innamorato. Seems reasonable. Looks okay. Here's the problem. He's a Republican. And as I said before, the Republican Party is no longer a reputable or honorable in any way American political party. And when someone runs under its banner, to my mind, they are immediately disqualified. Now, Rocky is making a big thing about saying that doesn't matter. We're talking about our county, and we're not nationalizing this. It's not about national issues, the county executive race. But the minute you start saying, well, okay, as a Republican, I guess he's, relatively moderate. But the fact is, he gave $1,000 to a nutcase, Barletta, who is a full-on Trumpist. He gave to his campaign. So when you're a Republican, you get tarred, I'm sorry, no matter how respectable you may seem. You get tarred by the company you keep. I don't know. I think it's going to be a very tight election, and I'm very nervous about it. I believe, if you haven't paid any attention to it, that WTAE has a debate between the two candidates tomorrow, and it might be well worth your attention to tune in and see these two people, one of whom will be the next Allegheny County chief executive. Oh, I found something. I wanted to share this with you. I got a kick out of this. When we look at who votes, women vote, old people vote, the demographics that vote the most. But what's interesting is that older women vote Democratic much more than old men. And guess who outlives the other? Yeah. So it was pointed out that American women who tend to support Democrats live almost 6 years longer on average than men who don't support Democrats. So if you look at the fact that as the electorate ages, at that top age level, you've got more women, and that's more Democratic voters. So I often hear people, we got to wait for him to die off. You're talking, you got to be a little more, don't do it with a hammer. You do things with a scalpel. I mean, no, you want the old men generally to die off. And since higher life expectancy is correlated with socioeconomic status and tends to be higher in Democratic-leaning areas, it could well be one of the reasons why Democrats are performing better among older voters than most people think. It's the women. Women make up 55% of registered voters over 65, 58% of those over age 80. And they tend, women voters, old women, vote for Democrats more than they vote for Republicans. So I thought that was a little sort of good bit of demographic information and news. Oh, God, guys. So it was E.J. Dion who did an interesting bit. Hey, I wanted to point out, my dog you guys with the ridiculousness of some of the Halloween displays. I should be used to it by now, but I always forget. I'm walking with my dog the other day. We're walking nicely, walking, and all of a sudden he just stops on a dime, his ears back, at attention. And I looked to see what had really startled him. And somebody had put, like skeleton hands coming out of the ground in their front yard. With, of course, the purpose being to get that exact reaction, right? I don't know if they were thinking about, hey, let's scare a dog. But it's interesting to see that dogs respond to these things. Not that they think, oh my God, look, there's a skeleton trying to get out of the ground. But obviously because they know that whatever that thing is, it didn't used to be there. And it's odd. And so whether it's a big blow up, these humongous blow up things that some people have, or some of the other things. I mean, the dogs are, like reading the other day that, dogs do not, anyone who has a dog knows this, they don't perceive the world as we perceive it. The first sensory input, the most important sensory input for them is their nose. And we cannot begin to imagine the information they take in when you're walking with one of them. They're taking in stuff left, right, and center. The nose is first with a dog. Hearing is second. And vision is number 3. So it's quite different from the way a human takes in their surroundings, and it yields different information. So I'm just saying, I'm fascinated by dogs. Don't you wish there was a way to, trade places for a little bit and have a sense of the world from their perspective? We share it and we establish such symbiotic, close relationships, and yet we're not really living in the same environment because it's perceived totally differently. That's why the sense of what is reality is interesting, because we think what? Human reality, the way human sees, is what reality is? Who said? The arrogance of humans. Jeez. Our way or the highway. When there's so many other animals with gifts so beyond our understanding. And yet we're the ones capable of making pronouncements. And God knows we make pronouncements. So I am aware that I have been up against this Donald Trump thing. God, sucks the air out of the room. And I appreciate anybody who's stayed there with me. I have other stuff, but I don't want to. I hate that when this happens. When I sort of end up with just a few things that are too big talk about in the time I have left? Well, I'll throw this in, apropos of absolutely nothing. Have you noted how child labor is back? Boy, again, and this is mostly because of Republicans. Loosening child labor laws, loosening the regulatory agencies that would otherwise police this kind of thing, allowing, of course, not only just children, God knows it's not their children who are working in these dangerous jobs, but of course, brown children, the children of what we call illegal immigrants. And so, when you eat meat and chicken and beef that have come from a slaughterhouse, I mean, the chances are that some little kid on a night shift has been the one who's gone in to what is apparently one of the most dangerous jobs you can have in disinfecting the killing floors. Children as young as 13 using pressure hoses and using acid to get the blood and the feathers out of the machinery required to feed us carnivores. And the big producers like, Tyson Foods and Purdue, they say, hey, we subcontract those. Those are the contractors. They know they're not supposed to be employing 13-year-olds. Yeah, right. So this idea that, and then the fines when they're found out are such piddling little things that it doesn't stop the practice. And I learned that, do you know that the Labor Department, which is the agency that is supposed to safeguard children from being put in these jobs, the Labor Department, you know how many inspectors they have for this entire nation? 750. That's how many. Those 750 workers are supposed to be making sure that over 11 million American workplaces are safe. Well, that's nonsense, right? Nonsense and impossible. But this, again, is the kind of thing Republicans do. They starve agencies. So they don't have enough inspectors. Now, the Agriculture Department has more inspectors, and they also go into slaughterhouses, but they're not there to help. They're not there. And it says that food safety inspectors who are there to see whether the meat is okay for us, those Agriculture Department safety inspectors have in their work regularly seen children working in these plants. But they didn't report them because it ain't in their job description. They're there to see if the meat's safe. They're not there to see if the child they see is safe. The Agriculture Department now says that they would retrain their 8,000 food inspectors to immediately report any child workers they encounter to the Labor Department. Okay, that's it. That was a little thing I had that I wanted to share with you, and there's the world. Okay, that's it for me. I'm done. God, another gorgeous day. okay, I'm out. I'm in it, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Looking forward to it. Bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.